Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. On day 14 of Ramadan, we're going to read Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam from me going to live from the prophets.
The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam became an orphan when he was a young child. When he was 6, his mum and dad were not with him anymore, and he was looked after by his grandfather and then his uncle, Abu Talib. He grew up taking care of his uncle's sheep. He was such a good boy that everybody called him Al-Amin, the faithful. As a young man, he married Khadija, and they looked after each other very well and were very happy. He was known to be very kind and to help needy people. One day, the people of Mecca were having a big old argument because they were making the Kaaba new and were fighting about who would put the most important part, the black stone. They decided that the first person to come in through the gate would decide what to do with it. They were all very happy that it was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam because they all trusted him very much. He had a great idea. He told them to put the stone on a cloth and everybody should hold the cloth together to bring the black stone to its place. Everyone was happy. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had children with his wife Khadija, and he also helped his uncle look after his little cousin Ali. The Prophet was so lovely and kind that one day a little boy called Zayd, who worked in the house for the family, refused to go home with his own father, even though the Prophet said he could if he wanted to. He said he wanted to stay with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet heard this, he told everybody that he was adopting Zayd as his own son. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not very happy with the way people behaved. They prayed to statues and were not very nice to each other. He used to go to a cave and stay there for a long time, just thinking about the world and beyond. Then one day, in that cave in Mount Hira, the angel Jibreel came to him. The angel asked him to read. The Prophet said he couldn't read, so the angel squeezed him and asked him to read again. But the Prophet again said that he couldn't. The angel again held him and asked him to read in the name of the Lord, who has created humans and everything that there is. The words the angel said at that time in the first 5 ayats of Surah Al-Alaq in the Quran. The Prophet then said the words. He went back to his wife thinking that he may be seeing things and going crazy. But Khadija said that Allah would never allow that to happen to him because he is a great man. She went to see her cousin Waraka, who knew a lot about Jews and Christians and prophets who had come before. He told her that surely Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will be a prophet of his people. Sure enough, some time later, the Prophet heard a voice to tell him to start calling his people to Allah. The first person to believe was Khadija, his wife. The next was Ali, and then Zayd. Abu Bakr was an important man in Mecca at that time, and he was one of the people who became a Muslim. For many years, the Prophet patiently taught people about Allah, at first secretly and then to everyone out loud. Many people became Muslim, even the Prophet's uncle Hamza, who was as brave as a lion. But as usual, as you know now, when a Prophet brings the message of Allah, there are people who aren't terribly happy. The same thing happened at the Prophet's time. Those people that weren't happy were worried about their pride and their money, that's all. They were the controllers of Mecca, the Quraysh. They did some very cruel things to the Prophet, but he was patient as usual and didn't do anything back. When the Quraysh saw that more and more people were becoming Muslims, they really got in a huff. They decided to start torturing the poor believers, but guess what? The believers stayed strong and would not stop. The people even tried to stop the Prophet from teaching about Islam by saying that they would give him more money than anyone has and make him their king. But of course, our dear Prophet didn't want the riches. The Quraysh were being even more cruel and making the Muslims' lives very hard. So the Prophet said that some of them should go to Abyssinia because there is a pious king there who is a good man. That king was a Christian and he was very kind to the people who went to his country to be safe. Even when men from the Quraysh came to take them away, he listened to the Muslim side of the story about Islam and didn't let anyone harm them. Meanwhile, back in Mecca, the Prophet kept on bringing people to Islam. More and more people were becoming Muslim. The Quraysh were furious and tried to get his uncle to stop, but his uncle protected him, even though he didn't become a Muslim. At this time, Umar also became a Muslim. Then, for 3 whole years, the Prophet and his followers were made to live cut off from the people who didn't believe. It was very hard for them to get food. Then came a very sad year for the Prophet. His uncle Abu Talib and his wife Khadija both passed away. His uncle was the one who had been like his father and had been so kind to him and protected him. He was going to miss his wonderful wife, who he loved very much. One day, the Prophet was telling a group of people about Allah. Some of them were from a city called Yathrib, then later it was called Medina. They became believers and went on and told their people about the Prophet. Now, when it had been 12 years since the Prophet started calling people to Allah, a very special thing happened. The Prophet went on a journey from Mecca to Jerusalem and then to heaven. Yes, it's amazing. This is called the Miraj. First, his heart was washed and he went on the Burak, which is sort of like a horse, but it can go very, very far, very quickly. During this journey, the Prophet met and said salam to the other prophets in heaven. Also here, Allah told the Prophet that his people had to pray salah 5 times a day. At first, Allah actually said 50 times, but then made it less for us when the Prophet asked him to, because Musa told him he would find it too hard. After that, some people came from Yathrib to make a promise to the Prophet to be good Muslims and to be good to him. Sometime later, the Prophet actually went to live in Medina. That moving from his home in Mecca to Medina is called the Hijrah. When the Prophet and his friends lived there, the city became Medina. The mosque of the Prophet is built in a place that the Prophet's camel chose by kneeling down there. The people of Medina were called the Ansar, the helpers of the Prophet. The Prophet and all the people lived there happily. Some rules were made which included that the Jews would also live there just as happily as the Muslims. But guess what? Those naughty people in Mecca did not give up. They still wanted to harm the Prophet and the Muslims. They marched 1,000 men to Medina to attack. The Muslims got together 300 men to fight back and protect themselves. Even though there were many men on the other side, they lost the battle and the Muslims won. This is called the Battle of Badr. Later there was another battle between the Quraysh and the Muslims called the Battle of Uhud. This time, the people from Mecca really wanted to make sure they win. They got 3,000 men, 200 horses and lots of great weapons. The Prophet ﷺ had a lot less men and only 1 horse. They lost this battle, sadly, because some of his men didn't listen to the Prophet's orders. Even Hamza was killed. The Quraysh behaved very badly and rudely at that time. Another time, they marched 10,000 men to Medina to attack, but the Muslims dug a deep moat around Medina and protected it with the small number of men they had. The Quraysh men couldn't get in, though they sure did try. They started running out of food, and at last, when a storm came and blew away their tents, they all ran back off home. 6 years after the Prophet and his people had moved to Medina, they wanted to go see the Kaaba and pray. But when they got near, the Quraysh stopped them. Then they all decided to make some rules to have peace between everybody. The Quraysh said that the Muslims could come back next year for Hajj and stay for 3 days and have Mecca to themselves. And that's exactly what they did. The Prophet sent the message of Islam to faraway places where kings were rulers. He sent messengers with letters. Some leaders listened nicely and others did not. After almost 8 years since the Hijrah, the Quraysh broke the rules of peace by attacking friends of the Muslims. So the Prophet thought it was time to stop these people in Mecca from doing wrong things. He marched 10,000 men to Mecca. The man called Abu Sufyan, who went to speak to them, became a Muslim when the Prophet spoke to him. The Prophet and the Muslims entered Mecca, and not many people tried to stop them. They came peacefully. Mecca was now a city of the Muslims. The Prophet ordered all the statues that used to be worshipped to be broken. Then he spoke to all the people. Many more people became Muslim. While in Mecca, the Prophet kept spreading the message of Islam peacefully. When one of his men didn't do it peacefully, without hurting anyone, the Prophet was very sad and sent lots of money to the widows and orphans. Then he went back to Medina and kept spreading the message. Slowly all the people around became Muslims and there was no more praying to statues. Everyone was living nicely with brotherhood and love. When the Prophet felt that he might not live much longer, he went for Hajj with thousands and thousands of Muslims. He stood on the top of Mount Arafat and spoke to the people. In that speech, he reminded everyone that they will meet Allah one day. He told them to be good to their wives and their husbands. He told them that if they have slaves, they should give them the same clothes and foods as they have themselves, and never be cruel to them. Then he said to Allah that he has given the message of Islam to his people, and the people all said that he sure had. Then, after doing the Hajj, he went back to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ lived in Medina for the last year of his life and became sick. He asked everyone for forgiveness and made sure he didn't owe anyone any money before he died. He died in the house of his wife Aisha, right next to her. The people were very sad. Some said they would not believe that he is dead. But the wise Abu Bakr reminded everyone that yes, Muhammad ﷺ has died, because he was just a human and Allah's messenger. But Allah Almighty will never die. The Prophet was buried where he died. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. And that is the end of that story about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he was our last prophet of Allah. So, should we start on the questions? Okay, go on, Yusuf.
Why couldn't the Prophet read? Didn't he go to school?
In those days, not many people could read. It wasn't something that everyone learns to do, like we do these days.
But he must have been so nice to children, that's why they'd wanted to stay with him.
He sure was. He used to be very affectionate towards kids, kidding around with them and kissing them. That's how all adults should be with kids.
You're like that with Mimigo. Are you copying the Prophet?
We should all copy the Prophet. He set the best examples for us.
I can't believe the Prophet had a journey on a flying horse to heaven.
Yes, it really is amazing.
But why did Musa ﷺ say that we would find it hard to pray 50 times a day?
We already find it hard to pray 5 times, don't we?
Yes, I guess it's good that Allah made it 5. Did the Prophet have any miracles?
Yes, the Quran was the greatest miracle of our Prophet ﷺ because of how amazingly beautiful and poetic the words are and its perfection and how much it tells us about science. But he also had other miracles like splitting the moon.
Wow, but what happened after he died? Who told people about Allah then, because he's the last one and no more prophets came after him?
Yes, you're right. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the last and final messenger. After him, other people were in charge. The first caliph was Abu Bakr. But now we have to tell the people about Allah. Now it's our job. The best way we can do that is by being good Muslims and being kind, peaceful, generous and pious like the Prophet. By never saying bad words or harming people, and by trusting in Allah.
Okay, Miguel, I promise I will.
inshallah. That's the end of that story and that video. So we are at the end of our Ramadan series.
This is the last one.
Yeah, the last story on
Mohammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we hope you really enjoyed our Ramadan series, and if you haven't watched them already, the link is in the description below, so you can watch all our videos through the Ramadan series.
I hope you like all of them.
Yeah, we hope you like all of them, and don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share and hit the notification button, and we will be back with another video soon. I hope the rest of your Ramadan goes well, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye.